Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back here, and I thank you for coming. I think the last time I heard about peace dividends, the Cold War was ending, and we were supposedly heading into a new era of love thy neighbor. Unfortunately, love was soon displaced by reality, by hot wars that quickly vaporized the supposed eagerly anticipated dividends. And thankfully, ending the war on fossil fuels will indeed yield enormous dividends. It's already doing so, and the dividends will go well beyond the savings that President Trump has promised from eliminating harmful, wasteful programs like the Climate Action Plan, Clean Power Plan, and bogus biased climate research. We will also see tremendous employment and economic growth, a continued stock market resurgence, wage instead of welfare payments, and revenue generation on a big scale because the ingenuity and muscle of our entire nation are once again being unleashed after being threatened far too long by the federal Leviathan. Equally important, these tremendous gains will be realized without any losses in real, meaningful health and environmental protection. Far too many of the recent air and water quality, climate change, and renewable energy regulations were based on exaggerated or fabricated, imagined or imaginary risks and benefits. And that approach to federal rulemaking is now gone. America will reap the rewards of not wasting billions of dollars trying to achieve minimal to non-existent health and environmental improvements under regulatory regimes that often inflicted extensive health, economic, and environmental damage in other areas. My earlier talk on the impacts of wind, solar, and ethanol programs underscored the ecological damage from these programs that we can now avoid. I'm now going to address some of the economic benefits of ending the war on fossil fuels. Under the previous administration, America was rapidly heading down the same path that uber-green Germany has chosen. Germany's obsession with climate change and renewable energy is forcing its families to pay 35 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, and its businesses and industries to pay 18 cents a kilowatt hour. That German family rate is nearly twice what families already pay for electricity in ultra-expensive California. The business rate is equal to what businesses pay in California. Germany's family rate is 3 times what families pay in coal, natural gas, and nuclear-reliant states like Indiana, Kentucky, and Virginia, where I live. It's 5 times what businesses and industries pay in those states. So let me give you 3 quick examples of how German and California electricity rates would hammer America. Average Virginia families currently pay about $1,500 a year for electricity. Under California prices, their annual electricity bills would increase by $875. At German rates, by a whopping $2,900 a year. Those rates would generate some pretty tough choices. Should poor and middle-class families heat their homes or feed their children, buy clothing or save for retirement? At its current 8 cents per kilowatt hour, Virginia's Inova Fairfax Women's and Children's Hospital pays just over $1.6 million a year for electricity. At California's or Germany's commercial rate of 18 cents a kilowatt hour, the hospital would have to shell out $3.6 million for electricity. So that's a whopping unsustainable $2 million increase year after year in the cost of keeping the lights, heat, air conditioning, surgery centers, and diagnostic equipment running and ensuring that patients receive optimal care. So how many employees would Inova have to lay off to make up for that massive increase? How many services would it have to terminate or cut back? How much would it have to raise its fees, and how would all of that affect patient care? In your states, how would your hospitals handle those massive price increases? Looking at the big picture, the United States uses 3.5 billion megawatt hours of electricity every year. That juice powers homes, hospitals and offices, foundries, factories, and refineries. It creates jobs, generates economic growth, lets us communicate all kinds of information, and safeguards lives. It ensures the incredible living standards, lifespans, and leisure time that we enjoy today. So at 8 cents a kilowatt hour, we can do all of this for $280 billion a year. At German or California business and industry rates, the electricity would cost us $630 billion a year. At German family rates, $1.2 trillion. So right there, for our most important energy source, we have a $350 to $945 billion annual potential savings compared to what we'd be paying if the war on fossil fuels had continued. Let's apply those numbers to your states. How many workers would be laid off in your factories and businesses if electricity prices were doubled or tripled? How many businesses or entire industries would have to just close down? What would it do to your welfare rolls and your state and local tax revenues? Are your school systems so flush with cash that they could easily absorb these skyrocketing costs? How many of your families would be driven into severe energy poverty? How many elderly people would die every winter because they could no longer afford to heat their homes adequately? How many people would descend into drug and alcohol abuse, spousal and child abuse, crime or suicide? And how would your states and communities handle the costs of those increasing problems? EPA often values each human life at $9 million, and using that metric, every 1,000 energy poverty deaths avoided through regulatory reform brings a $9 billion peace dividend. Reduced welfare and substance abuse treatment costs would bring tens of billions of dollars in additional dividends. So last November's election is slowly but steadily taking America down the road to regulatory common sense. It will save us trillions of dollars over the coming years and generate innumerable tens of billions more. And meanwhile, Albany has decreed that New York must generate 50% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030 and reduce its greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. The Manhattan Institute says these mandates will cost New York families and businesses $1 trillion in extra electricity costs over the next 30 years for no environmental gain. And thankfully, most other states are not going down this crazy path. Picking up on what Kevin was just saying, oil and gas leasing and production revenues plummeted during the Obama years, from $24 billion in 2008 to less than $6 billion in 2016. It was partly because the fracking revolution and cut oil and gas prices in half, but it was also because Mr. Obama's hardcore green regulators resolutely resisted any onshore and offshore energy development. That's going to change, and it already is. Interior Department Secretary Ryan Zinke is expanding leasing, drilling, and mining, and EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt is reducing excessive regulatory delays and costs. In fact, for the first time in memory, certainly since I got to the Washington area, instead of regulators vying to see who can crank out the most new rules, we have an entire administration actually devoted to rolling back excess regulations, again, without endangering any environmental health, safety, or other essential values. Adjusted for today's lower energy prices, Institute for Energy Research calculations put the value of federally controlled, technically recoverable oil and gas resources at $60 trillion. Based on Congressional Budget Office estimates, producing a portion of those vital resources could generate over $70 billion in state and federal revenues over a 10-year period from lease bonuses, rents, royalties, and taxes. Moderate warming plus more CO2, man-made or natural, would benefit people and planet. A new Pleistocene-style ice age, of course, would be an entirely different matter. Mile-high walls of ice bearing down on our cities and croplands, coupled with fiercely colder temperatures and far shorter growing seasons, would be a truly existential threat for all of us. However, eliminating programs that directed billions of dollars into ridiculous reports and models that blamed every climate shift and extreme weather event on fossil fuels will free up funds that are needed to clean up, repair, and rebuild after Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And by the way, those were the first major hurricanes to hit the United States in 12 years, a record 12 years. Do you suppose, perhaps, that record hurricane drought was caused by man-made carbon dioxide? Just asking. On a less bright note, the latest budget battle over biodiesel and ethanol shows that the Washington swamp can still force us to spend precious money on mandates that enrich a connected few while punishing the millions of the rest of us. Big wind, big solar, and big biofuel simply will not go quiet into that good night, not anytime soon. Far too many legislators, regulators, and agitators are wedded to campaigns that demonize fossil fuels, subsidize renewable energy, galvanize lobbyist activists and crony capitalists to defend these programs, marginalize, ostracize, and even criminalize anyone who stands in their way, and send copious cash to campaign coffers to get helpful politicians reelected. These folks exaggerate and fabricate man-made climate and weather chaos conjured up by clever computer models and then rush forward to protect us from hypothetical horrors decades from now by imposing edicts that lambaste our livelihoods and living standards today. Thankfully, President Trump is fighting a largely successful rearguard action. And as I suggested earlier today, ending the war on fossil fuels means we will not be compelled to spend trillions of dollars blanketing our mountain vistas, fruited plains, and idyllic seashores with massive industrial facilities to replace more and more of our fossil fuels with pseudo-renewable, pseudo-sustainable, pseudo-climate-friendly wind, solar, and biofuel operations. No one denies that renewable energy programs and mandates create jobs. They're just not very efficient at doing so. And each job that renewable energy creates tend to eliminate 2 to 4 jobs in other sectors of the economy because wind and solar energy is simply too expensive, unpredictable, and unreliable to power a modern economy. In 2016, for example, coal generated 7,750 megawatt hours of electricity per worker. Natural gas, 3,800 megawatt hours per worker. Wind generated a measly 835 for every employee, and solar an abysmal 98 megawatt hours per employee. Put another way, producing the same amount of electricity requires 1 coal or 2 natural gas workers, but 12 wind and 79 solar employees. So applying this renewable energy logic to highway projects, the next time we build a road, we should forget about trucks and bulldozers, and instead we should give our workers shovels and buckets, or maybe better still, teaspoons and cups. President Trump has gone along with some of this renewable craziness because our Washington swamp political system has forced him to do so. But overall, his policy will ensure that abundant, reliable, affordable fossil fuel energy will continue to power 80%, plus 80%, of America's amazing job-creating and peace dividends-producing machine. And then, of course, there's all that extra carbon dioxide that we and the rest of the world are sending into Earth's atmosphere. In fact, while the United States is still shutting down coal-fired power plants, the rest of the world is building or planning to construct over 1,600 new coal-fired generating units. Climate alarmists still wail that CO2 causes runaway warming. It clearly has not done so for nearly 2 decades, as climate experts in other sessions have pointed out. More importantly, moreover, in reality, carbon dioxide is vital plant food, the miracle molecule that makes life on Earth possible. Rising atmospheric CO2 levels are actually greening our planet by spurring crop, forest, and grassland plants to grow faster and better over the past 3 decades. Plant experts say that some 70% of that greening is due to higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that, too, is an enormous peace dividend worth countless billions or maybe even trillions more. Finally, reliable, affordable energy, especially electricity, enables a single U.S. worker in a big fabrication plant to do the work of 10 workers who do not have access to cranes, welding machines, plasma burners, and other energy-intensive machinery that lets them cut, bend, and shape steel up to 6 inches thick to make all kinds of heavy equipment. That technology also removes many hazards that accompany more manual processes, which greatly reduces injuries, accidents, and deaths. It also enhances worker productivity, keeps high-tech, high-wage jobs right here in America, and lets us sell amazing products all over the USA and the world. That peace dividend is worth still tens of billions of dollars. Now, I'm not an economist or statistician, but I can tell you this. These peace dividends, these incredible social benefits of carbon from these long overdue policy changes will continue to be huge, really huge. They will make America great again. Thank you.